although some people may not actually be in the room, but we do have a quorum. So we are calling to order December 19th, December 18th, Citizen Advisory Committee General Development Plan. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. I am very grateful to see your smiling faces, and I'm sure you've all done your homework. And so hopefully we can get through this, and we may even get out a little early today. So I'm going to turn it over to start with Patrick, who will walk you through this. And everybody was able to get on the G Drive, and I know some people made comments. And so we should be Patrick.
Sure. So what I was going to do is to try to walk through this this document a little bit with you all. I hope you all had a chance to read it. Some of you may, I think, had made some comments directly into the document, and some of you have comments that you did not make, and I'll invite you to bring them forward tonight as we. Some of the comments are a little bit less substantive, so I won't spend a lot of time as a group on some of those. So I guess let's just get started going through some of these, and you all stop me if we're moving too fast or skipping a section that you comment about. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. So I think these first four comments, you gave us a lot of good comments that we can take into.
Once an editor,
Yeah.
you can't not see it.
And I will point out a lot of this, the format that you see, this is not the way that the final document is going to look. We're going to be reformatting, putting it into InDesign. It's going to be a little bit fancier document, we hope. So, so some of that will be taken care of at that point as well. So scroll through formatting issues, under the different legislative references.
So there, if you go back, I have
Okay.
it. It's more than an edit, edit.
Okay, yeah, please.
Which is, if you go all the way back to the first page, before
Okay.
we get into the italics,
Mm-hmm.
there's just no transition. There's no explanation
Right.
to the reader about what these are.
Right.
So they don't tee up the following section the way you need it to.
Right.
So we need to.
We can
label
add
them.
that in. We can add in a sentence or some sort of a transition to bridge a little bit.
So I actually talked to Cindy about that issue because I had this content. I was like, you just land into this italicized text. And I think that the reason that text is in italics is the formatting is going to be similar across chapters, but it's like the overarching goals for the chapter. And then you get into the text, but I agree it's a little awkward because there's no intro as to what this really is.
Right. It's just, we need to figure out an easy transition so that the reader isn't just caught.
And I wish she were here. She may answer this. Do you know if she thinks that's like a sidebar maybe that flows through
you could address it with formatting. The problem
Yeah.
is we're in kind of like a traditional Word document here.
and it's hard to see that.
Right.
So I think we can address that in
Yeah,
the
I think
final.
we can too.
I agree with everything you're saying, and I have a real problem reading this. There was so much repetition that I was explaining to somebody who was asking about this here. I said, it's like they took 6 different presentations and smashed them together. There was no formatting that made any sense. I was really very angry when I finished reading it.
Okay.
There's a lot of repetition there, Patrick. It just wasn't well.
In terms of the
Well, like historic, the same detail on historic roads was just repeated in different sections.
okay.
That it should have been,
Mhm.
to me, joined together. Maybe I don't understand what you were trying to do as far as your italics and your formatting, but it sure didn't do it for me.
Okay.
There's a lot of very valuable material in this, but it could have been half the size and better done.
Okay, that's noted. All right, thanks.
Patrick, I'm not seeing the comments on what I'm looking at. Is it, where is the document coming from?
This is in the
The shared drive.
yeah, the shared drive, the CAC.
It doesn't
Document.
show up on the iPad. If you look at where it's highlighted and
Okay.
you touch it, it'll type comment underneath.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's not the way it works on the computer.
Depends on the computer. I have it as a sidebar.
On the computer, it'll work. On the
Yeah.
iPad, it
It's a
doesn't.
little bit different.
iPad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still can't see.
And don't forget, we're live, so speak up so people can hear you, because I have several people texting me and watching you.
Okay, well, stop if any of the texts are
Okay,
relevant
I will.
to where we are. So getting into the legislation pieces, I think we,
Page, we're on, please.
yep, so I'm on, well, I'm just scrolling down, so I'm on page 3 now, and I think Gary, your comments, we can work into those. So scrolling through page 4, comma issue, we can deal with that. Page 5, auditor choice, we can work on that. So page 6, this land development piece, that will come a bit later, so we will bring that and a write-up on housing supply and demand. Page 7, why are we talking about 2019? That's a reference to the 2009 GDP, actually. Maybe worth, this is a question related to, so in the second paragraph, key goals outlined in the county's FY 2016-2020 consolidated plan, which is expected to continue in the 2021-2025 plan, include investing in supportive services in order to stabilize housing for the homeless. How do we stabilize something that doesn't exist?
So,
Is there-
yes, I knew what we meant when we wrote that, but now I see why you didn't know. Yeah, so maybe we can elaborate on that, but just to elaborate a little bit more. The idea is supportive services, we could build housing for homeless people, but a lot of times homeless people have a lot of chronic issues that make it hard for them to remain stably housed. You can't just put a 20-year veteran, a veteran who's been on the streets for 20 years in a unit. They need those supportive services to help them stay there. So we can look at wordsmithing that to get to the meaning a little bit better.
Yeah, as I was reading this, I was trying to read it as if I was a resident of the county who was looking at it for the first time going, what does this mean?
Sure.
So there are places that I've kind of flagged word choices or this kind of stuff, just to make it clearer what the intent is. And didn't try to figure out how to do that. I figured you could do that far better.
Okay,
Yeah.
so should we just leave it for now and come?
Yeah, it's
we'll
just a
fix that.
flag.
Okay.
Sorry, Erin, can you introduce yourself?
Oh,
to-
sorry, yes, sorry, I'm Erin Karpowitz, I'm with Arundel Community Development Services, which is the county's nonprofit housing agency. I presented to y'all less than a year ago on some of this information, so I'm back to help answer these kinds of
Could you
questions.
take, what I saw in here, it was just driving me crazy, is that it was like, this agency, this office, this nonprofit, it's like, there must be 24 people organizations, either the county or nonprofits that all have their hand in this whole area. And I just find it very confusing. It's like, how these people coordinate? What is their area of responsibility? Is there overlap? Are we wasting money by having many cooks in the kitchen? I think it would, to me, that was, it just stood out last night. Of course, it was 1 in the morning, I was reading some of this, but, I was still pretty well awake, but it just, it was like, I wanted to go back and make a list of all these different organizations that are playing in this ball field. Is that?
Gary has a good point, because if you look at, it is DHCD, and then of course ACDS, and then you also have CDBG,
Which is a funding source. Yeah.
so we need to, Raymond volunteers,
Sure.
and so.
So one thing is spell out those acronyms, at least on the first reference, put it in glossary as
At
well.
least at the first reference, and then,
Yeah, they should be, so I
Turning-
apologize if that wasn't the case.
well, and then going down just a little bit more, if you would, Patrick, to my next question, which was on page 8, DHCD highlighted Severna Park as an opportunity area within the priority funding area.
And Gary pointed out the National
For-
Business Park as well.
So Aaron and I had a conversation about this map after we sent this to you last Wednesday, because there needs to be some refinement. And we have something that's referenced through the federal government, which are opportunity zones, but then we have this thing called opportunity areas, and we need to be really careful, because they're similar names, but they're not the same thing. So I think when we go back at this draft, we're gonna have to put some more clarifying language, plus the fact this map has now changed a little bit, and we're gonna be making, get it?
I appreciate that, because my comment there was, it looked like you were targeting these areas, and I'll just put Severna Park and Arnold as opportunity zones within a priority funding area.
These are not
so-
We're talking
opportunity
about-
zones.
Wait,
Yeah,
if I
two
could
different
just,
things.
if I could just clarify, so Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, they're the ones that typically have to be involved in the funding of affordable housing developments because they're so expensive. So they, in their policy priorities, have prioritized, okay, we want, and HUD, the federal government, which governs our funding, they've said, and we've said from a fair housing perspective, it's important to provide affordable housing opportunities in areas of opportunity, not opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are something else. So I think we do need to come up with a different term for it. You're right, that's confusing. But those are areas that are, have been mapped by the state, and they've been mapped by federal government to say, okay, these are areas that have higher indices of good schools, higher home ownership rates, a lot of quality of life indicators. And they've said, we don't want you concentrating all your affordable housing in Brooklyn Park. It needs to go in these communities of opportunity to the extent that the zoning and everything else allows. They're not saying you have to come in and, we don't have to follow local zoning and land use planning. But it's more of a funding directive from our funders saying, use this funding in these areas. I think it makes it a little bit confusing that it's on the same map as the revitalization areas. We've talked about making that into separate maps, but my understanding was that this committee had asked that it be all on one map, which I get, but I think you have really good points about it being confusing. I think the terminology does confuse things.
Well, and I understand that what you're looking for. On the other side of that, a lot of these areas are already maxed out for future development.
Yeah, but here's the thing,
So-
in order to get funding for the low-income housing tax credit program, which is the main place that affordable housing developers go for the 9% tax credit, the state of Maryland has already mapped areas, and they have different categories, but we really have no involvement in that map. So the areas are where the areas are, whether or not there is zoning capacity, land available. It doesn't necessarily dovetail.
Is this a state of map then? Is that what?
But some of the information on there is generated that way.
The communities of opportunity census tracts that are shaded in the orangish, those are all state designated communities of opportunity. And there are actually more than that, but we took out the ones that weren't in priority funding areas a few years ago. We said, well, we're not gonna fund projects in areas where there's not water and sewer, or, they're not PFAs. But that's what Christina was referring to. This map is about 5 years old, and the CD opportunity areas haven't changed, but the priority funding areas have.
Be nice to see that remapped then.
So
Yeah,
we're
it's not a
gonna
big change, but.
do that, but in the time frame that we were trying to get this to you, we ran out of time. So we still need to do a little bit of work on this section.
And so, a question that I have is with the separation of the census map, because we know what census tracts are these other three categories somewhere defined clearly. Because I don't remember seeing them.
I agree with you. It needs to be better defined so we can all understand it. Because when this section right here is the one I had the biggest discussion with Cindy about, because I was struggling. And I knew if I was, you all were.
It's an assumption. So, okay, so they've got it, I think, and we'll come back.
I do think,
With
so
the
those two
five.
terms, the commercial revitalization and sustainable communities are defined further down. So, so maybe it would be good to separate those and have two maps that,
I think it would be better to have two
I think it
maps,
would be
because
better
at this scale, it's very challenging when you're trying to put multiple layers with some in stripes and some
Okay.
in solids.
And most of us are doing this off of the computer because we don't have the capability of printing everything, and so it would
Okay.
be easier.
so I'm gonna make a note of that, maybe to separate the maps and separate out the commercial revitalization and sustainable community data to further down.
And have a clear
Yeah.
definition of what
Yeah.
communities of opportunity are.
Yeah.
Right, adjacent to the map, so we don't have to go looking for it.
Yeah, like a key, yep.
So isn't this map related to what we just did as an exercise for 2040 housing and where that was gonna go?
Not
including-
entirely, no. This is a subset, really.
Okay.
This is
So
not
this is
all
neat.
of housing. Really, I mean, I feel like we're focused more on affordable housing here. This is not the entire.
We did a lot of apartments in this conversation that we had, right?
Mhm.
Okay, make sure I'm clear, like you just mentioned. It seems to me like when she's talking about Smyrna Park, we really weren't talking about apartments as an example or affordable housing down there when we were doing our little thing.
But I think what she was saying was the mapping is something that's done by the state just to identify areas of high indices of their.
And so we are looking for places where we can do that, but also keeping in mind that, you know, we have APF requirements and land use
Line
requirements. and-
zoning.
Do you know what
Yeah.
their
Density.
requirements,
Take
what their
That's fine.
requirements are?
Adequate public facilities.
Okay, thank you.
So on the low-income housing tax credit program, the 9% program is significantly oversubscribed. They get way more applicants than they can fund, so they use a point system. These mapping pieces go into points that a project gets, that DHCD then goes through an entire list, and the projects that come out with the highest points get awards. So it's a way of differentiating projects, really, just to give you some background to what it all means.
But it's also a way we're saying as the county housing agency that we're prioritizing to put our funds as well. Because it's,
You trimmed down the communities of opportunity to only those within priority funding
Yeah,
areas,
but-
which is more than the state does.
right. But it's also our priority because that's where it's a fair housing issue and it's an issue of deconcentrating and not putting it all in certain submarkets.
You know how they came up with, the state came up with their criteria
Yes.
to say, here's where we think it should go?
Yeah, so, I'm not like an expert on this, but there are 5 different indicator areas that look, like I said, they look at education scores, they look at measures of poverty, they look at home values, property values, public safety, and employment, and I think access to transportation. And so
Yes.
there are a few different indicators within each of those 5 goal areas, 5 or 6 goal areas. So,
I have a question about the senior housing. There's a bill that's been introduced before the county council. So does the state and the HUD look at the criteria for seniors 62 and older when they're making a determination as to where these projects will go? I call it projects.
I mean, well,
Because
yeah,
you're not
But
looking.
but you generally split for a family project, because
And-
that's the biggest need, versus senior.
Well, so I asked because this new bill was just introduced, which takes it out of, what's the word I'm looking for?
it takes it out of the special exemption
Special
category
exception
and puts it
to
in
the
conditional.
use.
Yeah, and that's not something that we have a position on yet, but,
Well, you mentioned
Yeah.
about, employment opportunities and all that, but if you got 62 and older, they're not gonna be looking, I would think they're not looking at that in terms of where they select. So we have one that's already going up in Millersville.
and I would say, to answer your question, Maryland, the state of Maryland, their Department of Housing that allocates competitive funds, when they do their point, when they meet out the point system, they don't really give you high points for elderly in areas of opportunity. So it's not as critical as it is for family housing. Now, family housing, though, elderly people can still live there, so.
But the conditional use and special exception is down at the zoning level. It's a different.
Oh, I know, I'm asking about how they
Yeah,
rate these.
so you know how that project got funded? That project got funded through the state, but they actually got, for some reason, special policy priority points through the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development Secretary. The secretary of that department has like a special policy point, and so for some reason, and I don't understand why, it got awarded points.
We have R2 actually also, so that's kind of a.
We don't have any, we're not putting any of our federal funding in that.
Okay, Gary, you want to move on?
Yeah, I'm looking at this map, it's my area, it's not making sense. I mean, we have these brainy guys that said we need to build this Arundel Mills, and there's no yellow around that whole area around Arundel Mills. So we had to have all these businesses, they're all hiring low-income people, working minimum wage, and yet we don't identify that as an area of opportunity. I don't, it just doesn't make sense to me. And the funding, it seems like there ought to be offsets on the funding, shouldn't there? So if you build low-income housing around, say, Arundel Mills, the people that have to drive 20 or 30 miles from the house they can afford contribute to, and we could actually maybe reduce the cost of improving the roads if we had low-income housing around that area. So why isn't that marked yellow? I mean, that was a decision. So somebody made a decision
Love her
to
answer.
develop that.
So again, this is, again, it's solely based on the data. I don't think they looked at the indicator data and made there are several yellow areas around there, and there's one, in fact, that just got funded called Brockbridge Landing in the Jessup area. And so that did score on DHCD system, and that's going to be in proximity to the Arundel Mill. And we're putting funding into that.
The whole area over there has a lot of turnover of older people that are going nursing homes or passing away, and there's a lot of opportunity, and that ring of properties around the mall would help to alleviate traffic.
You mean as a redevelopment?
Possibly, yes. I mean, if there's I know one particular house, it's in terrible condition, they can't sell it, but if there was a program that would help a low-income person buy the property, that'd be an excellent use of money. And like I say, the county made a decision to develop that 700,000 to 800,000 acres, put in low-paying jobs. You've got to follow through.
So I will say that this map just, at least the opportunity areas, just kind of guide the investment of our funds into large multifamily rental developments. But to your point, we are using some funding, some federal funding and some county funding to go in and do just what you're suggesting, which is to acquire scattered site units that may be in need of repair and then make them available to low and moderate income households.
I don't think I saw this wording was pride of ownership. So if you have somebody that this is my house, this is my yard, it's pride of ownership. And I think that helps the culture in our community.
For anybody that's looking into that. In other words, how do you find out about a property like Gary just mentioned?
Well, right now, we have a portfolio of scattered site rental units that are available. So if a renter wants to come, and we have them available on our website. So we haven't done home ownership recently because the market has been such that in the revitalization areas where they're distressed properties, the cost of rehabilitating them is often, the total development cost is often over what the value of the property is, and we don't want to put first-time home buyers in something where they're underwater. So we haven't done that, but we're kind of looking at as the market goes up, maybe doing that.
So I attended a seminar the other night with ACDS. And we were talking with a large number of community members, and we were talking about exactly that, because sometimes the rent is higher than what the mortgage would be. And so they were talking exactly about that, and there's another gentleman that works in their office that helps with financial planning and a lot of the finances, and a lot is done through the church and through the churches in the area, as well as a lot of nonprofits in the area as well. And that was definitely brought up. Now that the housing market is getting better. Also, the rental properties are not in good shape, unfortunately. The landlords aren't taking care of the rental properties, and like you said, private ownership would be a great opportunity for them to take pride in owning the property.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Elizabeth, because, yes, they're on our website, but we go out and do a lot of market outreach at churches and community festivals and let people know about our rental properties, also that they can come in for our free home buyer counseling or our credit. We call it financial empowerment or financial coaching. They can come in for that free, and that helps people boost their credit. You might have low-income people, but maybe, they're working and they can afford rent, but maybe they have bad credit, and so then they end up renting the lowest of the low properties that need repairs, so, and don't have good landlords that have a pride of ownership. So we help their credit in order, and then that helps them get better rental units, or eventually someday perhaps be a home buyer. So, good question.
Do you reach out to you said community associations, how about like the businesses that run the mills, so that information to their employees right then and there?
That's a great idea. And I'm usually on the third Wednesday, I'm at the local development council meeting, which includes a lot of the business representation. So that's a great idea. With the chamber, the West County Chamber.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, so noted regarding the map, and scrolling down through, there were no comments on page 9, but I think a lot of what we just discussed folds into some of page 9 and 10, I believe. Moving into community revitalization in the commercial revitalization areas. As an opinion, commercial revitalization improves communities, reduces blighted areas, increases property values, and reduces sprawl. At least that's the intention of commercial revitalization areas, right?
Right, and what was Gary had a comment, I think you were asking to see you were interested in seeing some case studies or something that demonstrates.
Yeah, my research is saying that these traditional myths, I guess I'll call them, need to be looked at and backed up with now. That's why we're here. We've been doing a lot of things over the years, and it's just more and more the same. And it's like, well, this, if we do this, it's going to result in that. But history doesn't prove it out. So when we make statements like that and make assumptions, there needs to be something that backs it up with, here's the plan, here's the actual, and did we meet these goals? And I didn't see anything to substantiate some of them.
Well, I'll be happy to pull together some case studies and reports out there that demonstrate the benefits of revitalization. I don't know that I'm going to have a lot of metrics, quantified metrics, but I'll see what resources I can pull together that might speak to that question, and I can, I guess, make them available to Elizabeth.
AEDC had come around to Pasadena in the past 10 years or so about facade improvements and stuff along that line. And one of the comments I got from a number of different landlords was that the requirement was too high for them financially to get involved with it. Is there any consideration that relooking at the threshold in order for them to be able to qualify for the monies that are being offered?
You may be confusing the property tax credit with the loan program because.
Well, it was improvement of facades for a number of smaller plots that were
Okay, well,
up in the air.
they have a loan program that can be used for that type of improvement.
Right.
Who's they? Who's they, Lynn?
Economic Development Corporation.
Yes.
Antelope Economic Development.
Uh-huh.
And it is currently a cap of $100,000. So, I'm not sure maybe some had improvements that were going to require more than amount, but nevertheless, if you're in a revitalization overlay area, you can potentially take advantage. And there's no bottom line limit. In other words, even if you want to do smaller improvements that are only going to cost $1,000, that's okay. You can still, and it's zero interest. The property tax credit, which is also an incentive in those same 9 overlay areas, that's the one that I think some of the smaller business owners may not be able to take advantage of because you have to invest at least $100,000 in improvements to the property in order to qualify. And I think some of the smaller business owners don't have that kind of capital to invest that much. But again, the idea in revitalization is often layering different tools, stacking them on top of each other. So that's why the loan program can work hand in hand with the tax credit in those 9 areas.
Are there seminars for those kind of landlords? Because, it could be a 4-store plaza out there and the guy doesn't have that much money. I'm just curious as to whether or not there's an outreach to those particular landowners, landlords, so they become more aware of what you just mentioned. Because I've heard it often with the Pasadena Business Association.
Right.
That, they can't afford it, is what I hear.
Yeah.
So,
Well, EDC does do regular outreach to the property owners within those revitalization districts to make them aware of both the loan program and the property tax credit.
Okay.
but for instance, so when I worked for Prince George's County, I was assigned to the town of Upper Marlboro, which was a sustainable community. And Upper Marlboro was really tired. I don't know who's driven through there recently. So we actually created a facade improvement program, and we went after grant money through DHCD. And we stood a program up, we created some design guides, and then we had to have projects lined up. So it was a lot of boots on the ground, making sure we had people that really had projects. And there were all different kinds of projects that happened. But you go in with a grant application that says, we have these business owners who want to do these types of things. And in Upper Marlboro, the way we structured it is we took the DHCD money and then they got that for free. It wasn't a loan, and it was a percentage of the improvement. So, they're like, well, if I can get 50% of the money, I need $11,000 an overhaul on my facade. With me, maybe I'm a restaurant, I want to do an outdoor seating area, I want a new awning. The awning has holes in it and it's sun damaged. And it's an $11,000 program, and so they come in for a grant for $500. Now, Upper Marlboro, I think they went on 50-50, but you could structure the program any way you want, depending on how many people you had interest in. And administered that grant, and I think, Upper Marlboro, we probably got like at least 8 or 10 buildings done, and it was pretty significant. So, that could be a recommendation in the revitalization section, like, look at grant resources for facade improvement in, X areas.
Yeah, well, if we're talking about 20 years down the line, I think that's well worth looking into. But the objection I'm throwing out is realistic. I've had more than one brought to my attention, just bringing up.
Well, but if the existing program isn't working, like, what I think Gary is saying about this overlay issue issue is, okay, well, we've done these, but if we're not getting the results we want out of it, this is the time to make new recommendations to look at something that is going to work.
Which leads me, as a good segue, to have you all realize that there are 9 revitalization areas. If you have not seen this, unfortunately I don't have copies for everybody, it is on the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation website.
And that's what this section is discussing here.
And so,
Yep.
there are 9 revitalization areas. There have been 3 applications for revitalization areas redesignation.
No, this is sustainable
Sorry.
communities. So that's the different program that's the section following the commercial revitalization. And and so there are 3 applications, those are available online as well.
Can you send us the link to the website with that information?
Okay. And there are some, this one's still in draft form for commercial revitalization areas. So there's a lot going on, and Gary had a good point. We need to make sure that we all these we're aware of and talking, and everybody knows what the left hand and the right hand are doing within the county. Because there's a lot of moving pieces here.
So I was looking for priority funding areas on the county website today, and I couldn't find that information. Is that on maybe the state?
No, so we have it on the land use and zoning viewer, which is kind of buried. I mean, when I do a search for it, sometimes I get to it and sometimes I don't, but we can send you a link to it.
Isn't it on the main county page, very, very top?
I don't know.
Top tab?
Well, let's see.
I didn't look there on the main page.
I think I just discovered this.
It's on, there's an OIT GIS page, and it has like 6 different GIS portals. One is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
land use and zoning viewer, and it's you have to go into the layers, which are 3 pieces of paper, and then you can check the box.
Okay.
Bill got it.
I'm trying.
Okay.
He's got it.
Yes, I think it should
Land
be on the.
use, top
on the
right
main
hand
page.
corner, land use and maps.
There it is, yeah.
And where are you looking, Elizabeth?
the main page.
Main page?
In page, and then you go into land use and maps.
Yeah, I think go to interactive mapping applications.
So quickly addressing, we're discussing the commercial revitalization areas, and Gary, you had a couple of comments related to, I think, the expanded uses and the greater development ability. And I guess I would point out and Lynn, I'll defer to you if you want to say more, but these are defined in the zoning code. It's not an open-ended flexibility or expansion of uses. I don't know off the top of my head what the expanded uses are, but the list is it's relatively short, I believe.
Right, so, I'm sorry, let me see the comment here, this can lead to open new growth, we need to manage growth, okay. So, the expanded uses, that doesn't necessarily have to be interpreted as more development. Expanded uses, what it's referring to here means, if you're in one of these overlay areas, there's a broader range of permitted uses in certain underlying zoning districts. And again, the whole idea is the county is trying to create incentives to make it easier to redevelop these properties because redevelopment can be challenging, and especially in some of the more declining parts of the county. So redevelopment is not always going to result in more intensity or more density. It might, the site and given the market and given the circumstances, but it might just result in an improved use on that property. So if I can think of an example, maybe on Ritchie Highway in Brooklyn Park, there's, what is that site? It's the old Cycle World building. Karen's not here, but she knows it well. It's a real eyesore. It's a very deteriorated and dilapidated building that's been vacant for a long time. That's not a real big site. If someone redevelops it, I guess it's possible, but it's not likely that they're going to redevelop it with multi-family housing units. You know, what we'd love to see is someone just purchase the property, demo the horrible-looking building, and build a new building that could house retail uses, or it could house professional office or whatever.
Let me just tell you why I raised that issue, based on our discussions at the last meeting, and the report that came from the consultant, I came out of Virginia about the.
RKG.
Right. 2035, you're saying we're out of buildable property in Northwest County. So at some point, it would be, to me, it would be logical to assume in 2036 that we start looking at properties to increase, as we revitalize them, increase density. That's where my concern was. And a lot of this stuff that we've seen in development and change, increasing zoning from, say, R1 to whatever, tends to be a catch-22 scenario. And so that's why, you do this and then you have this effect. And, it's like you never catch up. And you don't have an end game. And we still haven't discussed the end game. What is the end game? When have we saturated the ability of an area to support this number of people per minute, or this number of cars per hour? We haven't really discussed that.
Right.
But I can see where we have, this county, during the period of this project, 2020 to 2040, you're going to be out of property if you keep things the way they are. And there's still, people are not going to stop having in 2036. Okay, so to me, we ought to think a little bit about that, because that's going to happen within this timeline that we've been tasked to look at. And the only way to address it that I can see is higher density, fill it up.
Well, and that, that's where the policies that GEP are going to offer that guidance. So I really understand what you're saying. I think there are going to be likely going to be some redevelopment projects that do result in more density and or intensity in appropriate places, and that's probably what our policies are going to aim for. And I think there'll be other types of redevelopment, again, that won't necessarily result in more density or intensity, but whose primary purpose will be improvement of a very deteriorated site. So you can
And
both.
to achieve this kind of goal, you also have to have timing. Timing
Exactly.
is everything, because if you approve 2,000 to 3,000 home development here, guess what? Now you've got 3 or 4 elementary schools. Look at the timeline it takes to get a school built today. So you can put down all these wonderful things on paper, but the reality is the county council members have to come up with a way to fund it in a given amount of time. And that time right now seems to be a lot more intensive.
Agree. The timing is a big factor, as is the market.
And the other part of that is that it's one policy for the entire county. And so we need to be careful of what happens in one section versus another section. Okay.
And Elizabeth asked about.
It's basically the same thing.
Okay.
Is, expanded uses and greater development. Well, are these
Okay.
areas, do they know that they're in an overlay that's going to be of greater uses and expanded uses and greater development? And that was my question as far as the communities. And most of them do, but, and I know Allison's working very hard on Glen Burnie and trying to do, we went to the, whatever, town hall, I guess, about it, one thing or another. But you have to make sure that and we had this discussion, Linda and I had this discussion earlier, is that if somebody becomes, and you can explain better than I can, about notification to the property owners. Can you
Sure.
explain it to them?
Yeah, Elizabeth was asking how people know if part of their community has been designated as a revitalization area. And so whenever a new overlay area, when the original overlay areas were adopted, and whenever a new overlay area is adopted or a change is made to one, we notify all the property owners within the designated area. And it also has to be legislated because it's incorporated into the zoning ordinance. So therefore, there will be county council public hearings. So that's the opportunity for the sort of greater public input. So does
So
that answer your
everybody
question?
gets notification in the mail as a property owner that is going to be involved in an overlay.
And then all the community associations who are on the,
That's a whole other issue.
right.
We're the only ones that got deleted off.
It's a whole other issue. So all the property owners are there, and then all of you should be getting your Monday newsletters from your constituent services representative so that you can see what's going on in your area every Monday. They send them out. I highly encourage you to get them, or you can get all 7 like me. Know what's going on in the county. Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Moving on. A lot of comments on the Sustainable Communities Program, the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative.
Okay. Yeah, you see, I want to make sure.
Yep, Karen
Yeah.
just, she's
She's
watching online
Right.
and asked if we know, she highlighted the over $4 million in grant funds to the Bayberg area, and she was curious, do we know how much of that has gone to this county? And I'm not sure if,
Get that very easily
okay,
on the top of my head.
might be nice.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Mary.
Okay,
Another point to add is that some of the programs that have been funded to that can be applied both in the city and the county. So it's not as if the funds have to be applied either or in the city or the county. There's programs that are cross jurisdictional.
which is the point of
Yeah.
the area.
True, so, okay.
She raised a point under redevelopment opportunities regarding aesthetic issues in the, at least in the Brooklyn, and incentives that, maybe looking at incentives to improve the aesthetic issues as well. And these were development opportunities, I believe, listed in the land use market analysis. So I think it's something to look at going forward. So I'm scrolling through page 15 and 16, that was identified opportunity areas. The redevelopment sites from the market analysis, Gary, you pointed out the noise zone in the Stony Run area.
Patrick, could you speak up? It's hard to do.
Okay, yeah, Gary pointed out the airport noise zone in the first, development site area.
And that noise zone can change as new aircraft
Right.
are brought on the service.
Right.
As a matter of fact, they're starting to, we just got notification that they're starting to process again. They're gonna go through it again on the noise contours. I think the first meeting is scheduled like January 23rd.
You mean for airport noise?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Can I give an example of something though, just how the words are put together? I'm just going to read something, and to
What
me,
page?
it's just too many words.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 10. And here it starts out, according to the Anne Arundel County Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, prepared for Arundel Community Development Services Incorporated by the Real Property Research Group. It's like, do we really need all, I mean, I don't even know necessarily what all these groups do. So somebody else is just pulling this up, like, it just seemed like a really wordy.
You can't cut this down, Gary. I mean,
It's
because
factual.
Yeah.
ACDS is ACDS, the Real Property Research Group is a consultant, that's their name. I mean,
Do-
that you just can't wordsmith.
But couldn't you footnote
You
it?
can,
Couldn't you, I'm sorry,
Couldn't footnote
Footnote.
it. So couldn't it say, according to the Anne Arundel County Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, footnote with who prepared it and when, there are 17,603 households earning $50,000 or below per year. I mean,
okay,
the reader, I think you're right on point, the reader, for the most part, is going to be the citizen of Anne Arundel County who wants to know what the background is for the recommendations we're making for the goals and strategies. So the easier we make it for them to process this, and yes, it's important to know that this is data from a legitimate source. What they need to know is according to this report, there are 17,000 households earning less than $50,000 a year.
Yep, leave
And
it at
if
that.
we
and
took
footnote
that
the rest.
approach
That's a good strategy,
all the
sure.
way through and
Mhm.
footnoted the detail
Yep.
about who voted and when, it's there for the policy wonks or the need to go back and check, but it's a lot easier for me as a
Oh, yeah.
user
Yep.
to get through
To
it.
get the big picture, which is,
Yeah, it's hard to read it.
Okay.
It's really, I found
All right.
it hard.
Right.
thanks. Okay, moving into
19.
historic preservation and cultural resources. Gary, you noted regarding Wishing Rock.
I mean, I got a feeling like nobody thinks about us in West County. I'm not feeling the love. And, we got some really cool stuff up there. And I was talking to her last time, she said, well, do you know about this Wishing Rock? I said, no. It's a site that was a get-together site from the Indian tribes throughout the East Coast. It's like, right now, it's full of beer cans and graffiti. So, I mean, we have some cool stuff up in West County.
Yeah, Pasadena.
That's where it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over and visit it. It's really cool.
It's actually on private property. It's on private property.
Yeah, I know.
And it's on a private road.
Okay, guys, we gotta keep going. Jane is here. Jane wanted to introduce herself again. She's,
Chief Cultural Resources and Historic Preservation, Jane Cox.
so she came and briefed us before, but she is back to answer any questions that we might have. And so we can make note.
Yeah, I think some of these we can probably incorporate, identifying the department, a real-time example of, protecting historic, how a historic asset is protected, and then incorporating the new development or plans. We can probably do that, and then involving local citizens in the process. So we can note these. Jane, you might address this. It's part of the three-decade initiative, the archaeology program, and then
We started reviewing historic preservation concerns, archaeology, and historic buildings in 1989, but we really didn't have a terribly strong code on that until 2005. So when a lot of the approvals went in for mills, we didn't have a lot of tools to work with. So it did exist, it was in its nascent form, and it evolved into what we have now.
That's what set me off, because there was a huge amount of artifacts that are now on the blacktop. Very disturbing.
The relationship to archaeology digs at CERT. So Smithsonian Environmental Research Center is through the federal program with Smithsonian. Our local program coordinates and talks to their archaeologists on a academic level, but they're completely independent and federally driven.
all right. Moving on, 21, page 20, what is this, 22? All right, getting into the actual goals, policies, and strategies. Kate, you had mentioned the sequencing question. One thing that is missing here is the land use goals. Those will also come into play here. So I don't know that, I think I would argue I don't know if sequencing necessarily indicates importance, or,
There's a tendency for people to make that judgment, whether you intend it or not. And what struck me about this is important as affordable housing is in the county and as big a commitment as the administration has made to it, it affects a very small percentage of the people in the county. And if we look at the plan as it's written so far, and I labeled these three kind of headers, because that's how I think about it. So the first one for me is an affordable housing goal, B2 is a sustainable communities goal, and B3 is a historic heritage, for lack of terminology, goal. In the affordable housing goal, there are 5 policies and 23 strategies. In sustainable communities, there's 7 policies and 22 strategies. And in historic heritage, there's 3 policies and 6 strategies. And I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of if I was the average person living in this county reading this set of goals and objectives, how would I feel about affordable housing being front and center ahead of the issue of sustainable communities and our historic heritage? I'm not sure that that would sit so well for me. And it may not be politically correct to say that out loud, because I know that affordable housing is a critical piece of what we have to deal with, but the other 2 categories affect everybody. Affordable housing, a portion of the population. So for what it's worth, it felt to me like we might want to position them differently.
Is the affordable housing person? I'm not really offended by that. All right. And I hear your point, and sometimes we like to fly under the radar because that's, you know, it is important, but also, yeah, I get your point.
I think though that people, the people need to be conscious of the fact that if you want an ice cream shop or a coffee shop in your community, that they're gonna hire minimum wage, and there is a responsibility then for us as the Anne Arundel County, not just a community, to provide housing for that person to alleviate them having to drive God knows where and fill up the roads with traffic. So, you know, it comes hand in hand. If you want the donut shop or the coffee shop, ice cream shop, then it comes with it.
Or daycare.
Daycare.
Or elderly care.
That's not, we all agree with that, and I think, but we were just talking about the labeling and the order and trying to make this as concise and good, so I agree, and we will be adding that, obviously. It is in there. It is definitely in there, so.
so there were several comments within the implementing strategies starting on page 22. Restock comment we discussed. Ensure that there is an appropriate amount of multifamily land inventory, and how can we ensure this? Should we use a different verb?
Yes.
We can use a different verb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make it easier on yourself.
Yeah, we might not be able to deliver on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Review county surplus land not intended for resource conservation for the feasibility of development of affordable housing to reduce total development costs. The subsidies. This subsidizes the development by taxpayers. Costs the same. It's just who pays for it.
I'm not sure I understand this.
Yeah,
Well,
Gary, can you explain, this was related to strategy C,
Which page are you on?
page
22, reduce total development costs,
so,
number C. This subsidizes the development by taxpayers, cost stays the same, just who pays for it?
yes, there is a fiscal cost to,
Yeah, I'm trying to think where I was going with that. One of the things that the cost of housing, and especially in this case, can be masked when you subsidize want to make that point is that we're going to be, because I looked in there, and somewhere else down in the document, it talks about all these, you know, incentives, and funding for this, funding for that, huge amount of stuff that's going into it. And, you know, I think we need to take, and maybe this is in the document, but take a look at, you know, where is all this money coming from, and what are we getting for a dollar? I think that's where I was coming from.
Okay.
But this one's
That's
talking
not-
specifically about surplus land, county surplus land, and potentially using that.
Well, because if it's
And
surplus,
helping keep costs down that way.
surplus land might be, as other municipalities have done, that the municipalities pull it up to help manage growth. So that's another opportunity, is to take land that's not being used by the government and use that to manage growth and keep the growth.
And who pays for that one?
What's that?
Who pays for that one?
Well, in that case, the local government pays for it.
What if you didn't have that in there at all?
It takes it out of the market.
What if you took out reduced total development costs altogether to,
Guys, we're not gonna get into all that. This is way too low, and it's not our job to reduce total development costs. That's not the CAC's job. So remember
saying take
our
it out.
mission.
yeah, I was saying take it out so that it's not a part of the discussion. Basically, you're
saying
gonna find land
choose one
to
of-
develop.
Yeah.
It's part of the plan to address the affordable housing need, and I thought this,
He's saying to take out, to reduce total development costs,
Oh,
just
gotcha.
strike that.
You
Keep the
just strike it so
same-
that it's all about finding areas you can have affordable
I think
housing.
that's right.
You don't need to talk
That's
about
fine.
costs.
yeah, good suggestion.
Okay, next.
Okay, I can't make that note here, but that's noted.
C, or E, sorry.
Citizens having a role in the plan review process.
Yeah, that was something that was done down in Washington DC. And it really brought into the local community to be actively involved in that process, and was very successful.
Citizens can be involved anytime, so.
I said significantly involved, or maybe officially involved, not just you show up at a meeting.
Well,
So there's examples I can provide where they used that down in Washington DC. It was very successful. Made everybody happy, kept people happy.
I disagree. Sorry, I'm gonna leave it as it is. It should be, there. If they wanna start and make citizens have an official role, then that's okay, but that's not up to the CAC to do.
Well, that was something that Mr. Pittman seemed to be moving in that direction to have
And
more
he can do
involvement.
that, but the CAC
Well,
isn't going to
Gary,
make official roles for citizens.
I mean, I tend to agree with what you're saying, but this would not be the area of the GDP where we would make that recommendation. I think there's probably somewhere else that could go.
But like I said, because of the success of that kind of
I heard you,
and case study, Washington DC, where,
they're not the only one.
yeah, so I think maybe wherever that might go, I think it's something we ought to consider as
I've
a
already
recommendation.
agreed.
I think this is a comment of agreement. So I think it looked like policy 1 we've covered. Policy 2, long-term versus permanent liens.
Is that my comment?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my only thing there was that if I think we talked about a meeting or two ago where you could resell the property in like 10 years or something like that. I think need doesn't go away for affordable housing. In fact, it probably increases. So why have that period where after X number of years you no longer need it? It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think, we're looking more towards that eye towards permanent affordability, like you're suggesting in our programming. Sometimes it does depend on run, if we're just putting a little bit of money into the deal and a developer coming with low-income housing tax credits, and that's like, $26 million and we've got 700,000, it might be hard for us if the state's only requiring 40 years, it might be hard for us to push for 99 years, which is considered permanent affordability, but I think we are looking more towards that, and so maybe we could change this language to say at least 40 years and,
That'd be great, thank you.
with an eye towards permanent affordability.
I'm sorry, where is that section that you were talking?
That was strategy A under policy BE,
Page 22.
1.2, it's page 23. Yeah, 23, the top of page 23. Wording, we can address that, and the idea of tiny house communities, I think that's something that may come in in a different section, probably. Scrolling down, we don't have any comments on any of the policies or strategies on page 24, unless anybody has anything to bring up at this time. And then 25.
Because we're almost to the end. So let us know.
Assistance to property owners, that may be something that we can add in, and
Yeah, my only comment there was to have the, inspector show up and you're a beta boy, well, okay, but what can he do to help the homeowner?
Which comment, please?
I think it was under
this is
F.
page 25, and then under, at the top, strategy F, provide for enhanced code enforcement in declining areas to prevent and eliminate nuisance properties.
So what's your issue with that, Gary?
I just, it's late at night, but I just like, the inspector shows up and says, you're bad, you did this, you did that. Okay, but if he was wealthy and smart, he wouldn't be in there to begin with. So maybe take an attitude of the inspector, what can he do to help? What can he do to suggest? Can he point the person over to one of these ladies that
So one of the problems you have in older neighborhoods is you may have people who, got 3 different cars, they've constructed multiple illegal sheds, they have 2 mobile homes in their backyard, which people are living in, and it tends to bring the whole community down. And so if you do concentrated enforcement to try to bring these properties into compliance, it helps everybody's property value. And that's really the vein that we're talking about.
The other problem is that legally, there's only so much an inspector can do. I mean, even if you have grass that's over 12 inches tall, the county can't just come out and cut your grass. There's this whole convoluted procedure that has to happen. I mean, when I got calls from communities where there was a derelict property, the inspectors told me they weren't even authorized to go on the property to check it out. They have no legal standing to go on that person's property. So, I mean, there's a whole lot more involved in this than just the inspector being a nice guy and saying, hey, here's what you can do.
Okay, are there any other things that we need to look at?
I have a question on what we're discussing now.
Yep.
It seems like this is needed, but enforcement, if you don't have the correct code in place so that you can go on a property and inspect it. So what if you just eliminated the word enforcement and provide for enhanced code so that we have something of substance to base a person's ability to go? I know I did that in my community because of covenants. So I could use that to go on and threaten somebody that we were gonna put a lien on their house and mow their lawn if they didn't get the code and they mowed it right away. But how do we, it should be feasible to do this.
I think, again, this is not something the CAC should be addressing. That's
No, I'm
not-
just about one word in here.
Oh, one word.
One word, just remove enforcement, because if you don't have
agree, because I think there are two things. There is the code, which can be weak or strong, and we should always be looking to have a strong, clear code. And then there can be enforcement, or there can be no enforcement, and so I think they're kind of two different things.
Well, we got problems in all three areas. We have a weak code, and we have weak enforcement, so.
Right, and so I think this one
How do
is,
you know it's a weak code for this stuff?
People, I'm just listening to the conversations. You can't go on, like, you can't fix something, and this was something that I had to deal with, and it was very easy
Yeah, but
because it was written in our covenant.
Typically, enforcement is progressive. They go on, they issue a citation, you have 30 days to get your grass cut, and then if you don't cut your grass within 30 days, there's another notice. I mean, and that's typically the way it works. Some people, you know, they really don't like enforcement. They'll wait until the 29th day to cut the grass.
Well, it worked for us, that's,
Yeah, because you've got comments.
Okay, so, what else? Are we good? Leaving? Anything else? 27, 28? Good, okay. So, I would like to introduce Jerry Pesterfield, who is here and is the president of the Planning Advisory Board. And there was some discussion last week about our CAC recommendations for the GDP going to the Planning Advisory Board, and have they been involved? Not only are they very aware of it, he's been to several meetings, and they are being part of the process. So there's a chance that we talked about, I think Gary had brought up that in long time ago, very far away, they had changed things, but he's not gonna change things. Maybe one or two, he'll wordsmith one or two things, and his committee, I'm not saying him, his committee, obviously, he's part of the process. So I wanted,
Are we done with this conversation?
yes. Are we not?
No.
Okay.
Not quite.
Okay.
Not quite. I just have a request for the staff,
okay.
because you guys are the planning professionals.
Obviously not, so.
Well, those are two different things.
And we obviously aren't, you know, I mean, the way you suggested writing it, I don't write like that either, so it's gonna be, I think, more challenging for us.
So,
I mean, I hear what you're saying, it's just a way different method of doing it.
so what I was gonna get to has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
It's a different issue. And it speaks to the fact that you have the expertise in what's necessary from a county planning standpoint to achieve these goals and objectives. And there is a litmus test that to use in planning that I would ask you to think about when you look at these sets. When you look at the goal and the objectives and the strategies, to answer these 4 questions on each one. Is each of the strategies necessary to achieve the objective and the goal? Is each of the strategies feasible to do for the county? Is each of them appropriate for the county to do? And as a collective set, are they sufficient to achieve the goal? And so I'm asking you as the staff professionals to apply that template, that litmus test, as you look at the collective set, to say, does this get where we need to be? That was it.
Can I pass that on?
I'll give it to you on a piece of paper, because I have other notes.
Okay.
Got it.
If you don't, it'd be great if you could pass that on in writing, so that'd be good. Okay, I forgot where it was. I introduced Jerry, right? Any other questions?
No, it's not a question, it's an observation.
Okay.
Because look, people at this table are here because they've got their feet on the ground in the communities where they are. And they hear all kinds of things that, from people in their communities about needs for change. In some sort of sense, we are recommending some change. And while there are processes in place, if we're going to really keep those same processes and maintain the status quo for the next 20 years. The issues are redevelopment. What are the barriers to redevelopment? Why can't that store up there in Brooklyn Park, that big, huge, ugly store, get changed? If there are redevelopment in shopping centers that are now vacant, what are the barriers to moving forward? So unless we're going to look at, in addition to your 4 questions, very simply, what are the barriers to a sustainable community? What are the barriers moving forward on culture and historical things? Where are they now existing in the processes? And those processes need to be looked at in some sort of comprehensive way for change slowly, rapidly, whatever in the future. Otherwise, everything that we're doing now stays the same. There are 94,000 more people that are supposed to come into this county within the next decade. Where are the opportunities for them to go? And what blocks those places from being used, redeveloped, or used to accommodate a variety of different kinds of population that is supposed to come? It's that kind of thinking forward that I don't see happening, and I do see a big resistance to even attempting to look at it.
I agree with you 100%.
I agree too. And let me just point out, I've had meetings in the last 2 days with people who represent tens of thousands of people in the county. The elephant in the room for us is the news that 28,000 new home units, as they say, are coming into this county.
That's not what the report said.
Well, that's what I read, and I haven't.
That's not what the report said. If we continue the way that we have in the past, given average, that is who would like to come and could be built in Arundel County. That's not to say,
I don't agree with you.
I agree, that's how I read it.
that's not to say that we're gonna take that number
So maybe.
and put it in
That's
there.
what we said last meeting, you put the map.
I
you
did put the
Legos
map
on
down
there. So we gotta have 28.
No, I didn't. I did not say that.
That's what
I
heard.
said,
We
no,
had
then
more.
you didn't
We
hear
had
correctly.
more.
I said that there were 28,000 projected for Anne Arundel County. We need to find a place for them to go and put them on the map. That's not to say that we're going to
We
28,000
don't need to
people
find a
move
place
into
if they
the
don't
county. So,
It doesn't seem like our objective is what everyone in this room knows. We have to have an objective that comes out of this organization and all our work to slow down new development. And when we look at numbers like 28,000, it's like being electrocuted. And that has to be addressed in this group.
I agree, and we all will address that. We don't have to accept that recommendation.
Well, that's not very clear, Elizabeth, because everything I've read says we've got 28,000. You said projected, what does that mean? Why didn't they use better words that said, these are people who might like to come in if we can find affordable housing? Or it's that 28,000 are projected to come into the county. Well, even if that number is correct, it goes back again to looking at where and the barriers that prevent those things from happening.
And that 28,000 is based on information from 2017. Keep that in mind. That does not include everything that's already been put into the pipeline. And Lynn's gonna,
Well, I just
address
wanted to
the-
make one comment about Pat and Amy's comment, and I completely understand your concern. I guess I would say before anyone gets too hung up on a number, projections like that are a planning tool, and we have to have those types of tools so that we have some idea of the different scenarios that could occur in the future. But the whole purpose of a comprehensive plan like this is to put the policies in place, and those policies together with the mechanisms that are used to implement them are what's going to determine how much capacity for development there is in the future. And it may be that we don't end up with capacity for 28,000 more units, in which case that won't be the scenario that's realized. So that's why people talk so often about this being a policy document. And that is the key thing. So, that's what's to keep in mind. Projections are a planning tool. And again, it's a scenario out of multiple different scenarios that could occur. We don't know every market force that's going to shift over our 20-year planning horizon. So there's so many factors that could change the picture. But your policies, again, and the way that they get implemented are what's going to influence how much holding capacity we have in the county.
Well, we have very little holding capacity, and I don't see that being projected here.
An email with kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get to that. Okay, so Melanie sent out an email this morning, or maybe it was last night. It's at the bottom. First, she was asking about making a Gmail group. But at the bottom, she made us aware of an event that is going to be held in February that is exactly talking about this. And it's sponsored by AIA. I'll turn it over to her.
Well, AIADC, and it's sponsored by the National Historic Trust. And it came across a group of my colleagues in Annapolis because we're all addressing this. But it's called Demystifying Density. So if you, so they're talking, and this is in DC, right? So this is the metropolitan area, DC metro. So you can just define your boundary on that. It's, Northern Virginia, some of Maryland, probably not all the way up to us. But their projections, as they say, is that they're expecting 300,000 new units in the
Units or people?
Units in, units in. I'm trying to. Can you get your email from there?
I have it.
If you multiply it
Let me,
times 3.
That's the projected demand,
Yes.
not what's gonna be built necessarily.
Right, so the Washington DC metropolitan area needs to add over 300,000 housing units by 2030 to meet its current demand. Most proposed solutions have focused on high-rise, high-density development, transit-oriented business centers, blah, blah, blah. So it's just, I thought it was, it was just so apropos for exactly what we're dealing with here at a scale.
Well, she sent this yesterday to
Yes.
all of us at 4:24 p.m.
Right, so
And
there's.
it is titled December 18th Meeting Materials and Instructions. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it has a link to this event in February.
It's a full day, 9 to 3:30 at the District Architecture downtown DC. So I realize that not everybody can go to this, but I think it's,
What's the date again?
the February 20th, Thursday, February 20th.
I read it as soon as I saw it last night, but the thing that concerned me was when I looked at the presenters, and they have a vested interest, if not a conflict of interest, in promoting development, because that's how they make their living. So I didn't see a balanced list of presenters. So I was, at first I said, I want to go.
So I'm the executive director of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. I don't see this as a conflict of interest. These are the people that are the professionals who are supposed to help us resolve this in a way that's as best as possible for everybody.
So
Architects don't make a demand. This is hosted by the AIA. Trust me, if we could create our own demand, we wouldn't be as broke as
I'll
we
So
try
are.
I went to a presentation that COG did up at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And basically, they got into projections based on jobs they think are gonna come. So it's a different kind of projection than our estimate, because it's really about if we're gonna grow as much as we can with the job demand, we are in a deficit of housing. So it is a bit of a different approach in how they're getting there. And so the flip side of that is, if we don't grow, we don't get those jobs, they're probably gonna go somewhere else.
On that note, I'm going to give Jerry Pesser, President of Planning Advisory Board, an opportunity to speak about a report he has shared with me about the future and numbers and one thing or another.
Well, with all planning by the board, can everybody hear me? Okay?
No.
And you're on tape.
I'll meet you for coffee. You guys saw a report called Measurements from Margaret.
A couple times ago.
It shows every year the county produces a measurements report that comes to the PA, an interesting path. It comes to the PAT to approve to go to the state. It doesn't go anywhere else except by distribution that I know of to any county. It's not part of our role, as well as Gary will advantage of it. But every 3 years in that measurement report, there's another column that wasn't in the one you saw. And what that is an inventory based on the current zoning we have that was passed in 2009, which is a perpetuation of 1999. Based on existing zoning, if you do nothing else, there's X number of potential housing units in Anne Arundel County based on the zoning. No upzoning or downzoning, here's the number. That number in 2017 report, which the consultant reported on to you, about 28,000 more homes, showed 15,000 potential homes as inventory in the county under existing code. Our burn rate or build rate, not application to build, but actual physical build rate, is about 2,500 homes plus or minus a year. So since 2017, 2018, the build was 2495. Was the number. So if you take, and this year we're going to be probably about the same. So let's take 2,500 a year. Out of that 1,500 that was potential under the current zoning in 2017 is now down to 10,000. That's assuming every homeowner was going to build something. Now, there are a lot of things in that model. They've already, it's a very complex model. They've already taken out things like wetlands and things that might be zoned R2, but it's too wet to build R1. So when you take it down to the number, the way I read the consultant report, I was here for the meeting, is that there's demand for 28,000 homes. It doesn't mean
We have to give it to them.
so if you take 28,000 minus the 10 for last year and this year that's built, 2017 data, that 28,000 is now down to 18,000. We have 10 in inventory that hasn't been built. You're down to about 9,000. If you did nothing right now, you're only going to come up about 9,000 short. Now that's not an idealistic world, because everybody that owns a parcel may not want to build on it. We didn't see this coming. The building community has already gone everywhere else because they see it. They know what this all means. The question is what you guys want to do with the regional demand or the county demand. The consultant was just parsing out the 300 potentials for the region. Anne Arundel County, you guys, can decide, and I've heard it for a year and a half, I've been involved in all these meetings about, you don't want it. Even if you didn't want anything, you're going to get 20,000, you're going to get all but about 10 of them anyway, okay? So what you do beyond this is up to you. Now, Howard County may want the 20,000 we don't want, or the 10,000 we don't want. That's up to you guys.
I don't think that's true.
No, but I mean, what
But
I'm
you-
saying
but-
to you, Anne Arundel County could choose, we like it the way it is.
By
We're gonna
policy.
do a little bit of redevelopment and call it a day. That's
Remember?
what this board is trying to figure out, or this committee's trying to figure out. It's not a build and they'll come, it's what do you want? Okay, that's the way I see it.
And it's by policy, and that's the thing that we need to do. So that exercise we did before, thank you, sir, we appreciate that
She had that
explanation.
date.
And so remember, like you said, we can't just say, sorry, nope, Anne Arundel County is closed. It's policy. And we have to be able to put that in, and we also have to be able to change the code. And because this is planning, and we will have an implementation phase, and we need to change code, or maybe not. I'm gonna talk, okay,
Just
Alan.
a couple of comments. I appreciated what you had to say. Howard County had a policy of rising to allow people to build in the county to increase their tax base. So pretty wise, pretty effective. So the more you build, the more you bring in, the more you have that you can invest in schools and other things. So if you don't build, you're not going to increase your tax base. If your GMP doesn't increase, then you're stuck in a rut.
And
Right.
if your properties are declining in value because people aren't taking care of them,
That is entirely possibly true. One positive benefit to not building is that if people want to come here, the property becomes more desirable financially if it is in good enough repair. So you should see housing prices increase. The bottom line is if we want investment in the county, there are only two ways to get it. One is to build, and build in a smart way that brings people in and increases revenue, or increase taxes, or not build.
So,
Okay, hold on,
You're
wait a
stuck
second.
with one of those three things.
Because she had her hand. Ellen?
Well, the other, the wave of the future is called the shared economy. Anybody heard of that?
Speak up.
The shared economy. We haven't even thought about or looked at what that means in terms of individual big pieces of property, and any of those homeowners, things in small little ways that bring in and that provide a place for people to live. I mean, there is a whole wave of new things happening out there that need to be considered. And then we go back and say, we have authority to do nothing. And we have been told that. We are looking at policy guidelines, and they will be decided by professional staff or somewhere else later, but they sure as hell are not going to be decided by us.
no,
And
decided by the county council.
Well, yes, they will be, but they are not going to be set in motion by us,
In your opinion.
in my opinion.
In your opinion. Patricia.
It might be set in motion.
I have no
We
objection.
might give it some.
Okay, hold on, Ellen, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, time out. Patricia has the floor.
I have no objection when you talk about high-density housing. I'm, big fan of high-density housing, if it has proper infrastructure. And we never talk about infrastructure. Just because someone thinks we can have 28,000 houses, we don't have any roads or schools or anything else. We can't have 28,000 houses. I asked you last time if we would do that same exercise
Based on-
with the map, the infrastructure. See where we're putting these little houses, these little Lego blocks, can they support those Lego blocks? Because, and this county does a dismal job in supporting its development. And I would like to see us, I don't know how we're going to get into what this man says, which I agree with,
Okay,
but I would like to see more discussion on infrastructure and how we're planning this.
and I'm gonna raise my hand and pick on myself and get to the level playing field, because we are so far behind in infrastructure and a lot of other things that before we continue moving forward, we need to catch up.
Thank you.
just comment on your comment about the only way to pay for things is to build. That's not true. There was a study done in 2005 in this county about building and the cost of building, the cost of the road. And although it's old, it probably should be redone, and as well as looking at the impact fees. It clearly said development does not pay for your infrastructure. Don't think that it's going to do that, because it isn't. It will bring problems if you're not putting it into a plan will just add to your problems.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, I mean, you're all saying similar things, but they have to go together. That's what you're here to do, is to make a cohesive plan. It's not actual, it's a plan of what you want. I've seen counties go to a no growth. Now, they can pay for everything by just having a different budget. That's a decision for the administration, it's a decision for the county council, it's a decision for everybody. From my perspective, I'm expecting seeing a plan from all of you that basically says, here's the way we see the county going forward. And if you do no zoning, you will not have more places to build. Zoning is zoning. So, the only thing I saw is some of the stuff that Lynn's been working on redevelopment. That adds places. But I didn't see anything or heard anything, and I've been to almost all your meetings. I've been involved with it for almost 2 years now. I haven't heard anything that says you want a huge amount of development. You've got a lot of problems with roads, schools.
You said we are here to change the code, is that correct?
We are not here to change the code. We are here to recommend changes, but it's up to the county council, and that's why it's so important for the implementation and for the follow-through of this. We don't change the code.
What we're doing here, the administration is already putting in bills and has passed bills and put in bills that's changing the code.
Correct.
That is directly impacting stuff we're doing here.
Correct.
We have no say in what they're doing at this point, and a lot of it has to do with high-density housing.
One bill did has.
There's two. The administration has put in 2 bills that increase high-density housing. One was just introduced Monday night.
Okay, and that is, and for all of you who haven't seen the announcement, the budget is coming. And town hall budget meetings are scheduled for every district in January. I suggest you pay attention to those budget and attend your district or one of the other ones, town hall meetings in January, because it will make a difference. So, Alan.
Let's see, when we were doing the math exercise, we were putting Legos everywhere. One of the comments was, we're gonna get to infrastructure.
Yes.
When are we gonna get to infrastructure? Because I fundamentally think that they're right.
Oh, we all do. We all need to know.
We need to conceive the infrastructure before we conceive where we're gonna put Legos.
Yeah, totally.
Infrastructure is towards the end, because my understanding is we're waiting for some background study. Am I wrong, Pat?
I think that's right. So the next meeting will be dealing with waste management and community facilities, so we'll start touching on transportation, which is a hot topic. I think we're scheduled for that in early February, so that'll be the next meeting following up.
And infrastructure is definitely an issue. And like I said, we need to catch up. We don't need to continue moving forward. We need to catch up.
And this is what Howard County did, is they built the infrastructure before they started building all these.
Oh, what a novel idea.
What a novel idea. So, I mean,
What a novel idea.
That would be my footnote.
Okay, a couple housekeeping notes. So make note that in January, we have one meeting, okay? We have one meeting in January. And then we go back to 2 meetings in February. But because of the holiday, we have one meeting in February, excuse me. And so everything is on the C drive. So if you have any questions, that I know you all read the minutes. So do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
Second from Kate, and Matt will make a motion. Second from Kate, all in favor? Thank you. Any abstentions? I don't see any nays? No, majority. Okay, and I encourage you to get online to look at what Melanie was talking about, Gary was talking about with Folders book and the economic development site as well. So,
I'm just gonna
say it again, I sent you all an email,
Yes.
I finally finished the book, you gotta get it. Just about everything we've been talking about in here, now, of course, it's his opinions, but he has a lot of backup and case studies from around the country that support his claim. I would highly recommend.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was the one that we
I
gave.
sent-
And we gave the Growth Action Network, Growth Action Network gave a copy to every county council member.
And I know one county council member said, I haven't read it yet. Trust me. But anyway, there was a short video that I included the link to,
And that was also yesterday's mail. Do I have a motion to adjourn? John, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
everybody.
Christmas, happy holidays, safe New Year, all of the above. And no holidays here because I thought time would be better, right? So now